All right. Well, we'll get started. So, good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Jennifer Kojal. I'm the Director of Continuing Education here at Texas Tech. So, if you haven't been to our school, welcome. If you have been here before, welcome back. And thanks for joining us this evening. I would like to take the opportunity to thank our sponsor for dinner tonight, Elanco. So, let's please give them a warm applause. Yeah. So very much appreciate. They got Tyler's barbecue, which we all love if you're from Amarillo. So hopefully everybody got enough to eat. I think there's still some out there. They also brought quite a few brochures, pamphlets, nice notebooks. If you haven't grabbed those, also I think there is a drawing for a cooler out there. So if you haven't got any of those, please stop by and say hello to those folks. So that's that. Also would like to thank High Plains VMA. They co-hosted this event for us. They will also be the ones responsible for continuing education certificates. So reminder, only those who are in person will be getting CE today. And so those emails with your CE certificate should be coming to your email later this week or the first of next week. So if you don't see it in your inbox, please check your junk mail, your promotions mail, whatever other diversions your email has set up. And then if you haven't received it by the first of next week, please reach out and they'll make sure they get it to you. So there's that. I'd like to have our panelists come up and we'll do a brief introduction of them. So if y'all want to join me, we'll see how you all sit and I'll introduce you from there. Perfect. All right. Start from that end. Perfect. I can start from that end. So on my far left, we'll start at the very end. So we have Dr. Stafford. She is from Elanco. She is a regional veterinary specialist, correct? So she covers this area. So she was in general practice, emergency practice before joining Elanco. So we're glad to have her here. Next, we have Dr. Chris Womack. He tells me he's semi-retired. I don't believe it. Practiced down in San Angelo. Comes from a mixed animal practice, but does a ton of food animal, livestock, small ruminant work. Next, we have Dr. Gary Warner, also semi-retired, but I don't believe it. He comes to us from Elgin, Texas, Fredericksburg area, does almost exclusively bovine work. So he was generous enough to come all the way up here for that. And then we have Dr. Susan, who is a field epidemiologist for Texas Animal Health Commission. She goes from Stevensville to where's your region? I don't know. She covers a lot of ground. So we thank her for coming. I think she got in at 12:30 this morning and has to drive all the way to Alpine. And so she's made a lot of tracks. So thank you all for being here for that. So, all right. All good? Perfect. All right. So how this is going to work. So I have some questions that we're going to go through, ask the panelists, and hopefully answer a majority of questions. And then at the end, we'll take questions from the audience. So, all right. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Susan, because I know you just got the latest numbers. So give us a brief level set of the current situation, including number of cases and the number of current infested zones.
Okay, so I spent some time down at the ICP down in Eagle Pass, and now we've moved it up to Pleasanton. But currently we have 11 zones. We have 22 premises, 30 animals total were effective, and we had 9 inactive and 21 active cases. So that's where we're at now.
All right, Dr. Womack. Oh, he's got a microphone. We have to play a little.
Right now. Good. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Based on the current situation in South Texas, what should veterinarians and livestock owners be doing, and how should they prepare?
The most important thing they can do is observe their animals. I guess TR said the most important thing you can put on them is your eyes, and I agree with that. Vigilance is going to be paramount. We need to know if we have a problem. Unfortunately, a lot of producers, myself included, we have remote properties, leased properties, and we may not get there but once a week. We check waters with a game camera, and you're gonna have to change the way you do things. But observing the animals is I think of paramount importance. Um, what should they do? Um, this thing I don't believe is going to go away in short order. It's going to be a several year process of getting this situation under control. So now's the time to start thinking about changing your management styles. If you don't have a breeding season, you need to get one. This stuff about leaving your billy goats, your rams, your bulls out year round has the potential to hamstring you a little bit. We need to concentrate our breeding seasons. We need to think about that now for the future. You can't change your breeding season after the fact. So something to think about. You got to work with what you got right now. I was in South Texas earlier in the week, and there's baby calves on the ground running in the pasture with 4-weights. What do they have available? They got observation and be prepared. I guess that's about all on that one right now. Good enough?
Yeah, I will ask this follow-up question. So Dr. Womack has had the opportunity to spend quite a bit of time in Panama, Central South America, where they deal with this all the time. So, and they live with this. And so what are some management practices that you see down there that we can immediately implement up here, knowing that we're going to have to deal with the cards that we've already laid on the table?
Right. Well, Panama is where I spend essentially my experience in Central America is in Panama, and they've been without screwworms since 2002. So a bunch of those people there's a degree of generational ignorance as to what to do and why they need to manage things the way they do. I was asked to speak to ag students last 2 weeks ago in Panama about how to manage their operations to mitigate the impacts going forward. Number one recommendation I had is observe your animals more. They have weekend ranchers down there just like we do, and they may only see their livestock on the weekend, and that ain't going to cut it. We need to. That may be a deal where you have to take off work early a couple of days a week, just so you can get out amongst your cattle. That may mean you have to hire some part-time help. And that's just the nature of the beast. We need to be more observant. I told them to manage their breeding seasons. What are you talking about? That means take your bull away, take your rams away, take your billy goats away, manage the breeding season. We even in the United States, we've been ignorant of it for 50 years, and what's happened? We lost a lot of management techniques and a lot of husbandry techniques that we grew up doing because we were told to do that, but we also, our parents and grandparents were telling us to do that for a reason. I was told that a goat couldn't breed out of season. You could only have kid goats born in the wintertime. Well, that's not right. You leave billy goats out, they're going to have them whenever they have them. So managing that breeding season is important. Getting familiar with the clinical signs, learning how to treat. They have different products down there some products are extremely effective down there. And I mean, what else can you tell them? They're in it for the long haul down there because they're not going to have the sterile flies available to them for at least a decade. So.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to squeeze a question in here. Dr. Susan, can you kind of explain what peak New World Screwworm fly season is so that people can kind of get an idea of that?
So the screwworm, it likes warm areas. The peak season, I mean, it doesn't like winter. So it's going to be, the summer is going to be the peak season. And it really likes the umbilicus of the babies. And that's why I think the management practices really helps. But yeah, that's the peak season, is that springtime when the flies all come out. So that would be it.
Really starts in spring, peaks in the summer, and then kind of tail ends through the fall. And then most of places, except for very South Texas, gets cold enough that it kind of
yes,
goes right.
correct.
Yeah. Because screwworm fly doesn't really like less than 50 degrees Fahrenheit, right? That's all right, Dr. Warner. So fall livestock show season is about to be upon us. What do all of our showmen, families, ag teachers, 4-H leaders need to be aware of, and how should they proceed as they get ready for those, especially when we start thinking about shearing steers, things like that?
Well, certainly, vigilance has already been discussed, is still going to be very important on our show animals, but then there again, most often, most of the kids and the families involved with the projects, they are already more vigilant with their livestock than maybe some of our other producers we've discussed about. But it's still going to have to be, there'll be a difference between those animals that come from an infested zone versus projects that are in other areas of the state. By the time we get there, there's no telling as to what the involvement may be within the state. We have a unique situation in that we've got a playbook to follow that dictates how we do things, particularly from animals in the infested zone. And there's a little bit of a gray area with the market animals, because not all market animals that go to, let's say, the state fair are gonna stay there, but a lot of them will stay there. And so we have a little gray areas how to manage those, that when I got presented with this question, I went to asking a question too, because I hadn't thought about it. And there's going to be some determination yet to be made on how exactly we deal with the market animals. So certainly the market animals could be inspected before they leave to go to the show, but that's inspection's only going to be good for 3 days. So there'll have to be a process figured out how to manage those after that three-day expiration of the inspection goes, whether they're re-inspected, and then whether they return home, or whether they go on to a facility for harvest, is yet to be determined. So we of course can't give them the prescribed ivermectin at the time of the initial inspection within the infested zone. So there's still going to be some things that need to be figured out.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely not one case fits everything. So, I'm with Texas Animal Health Commission, and we do inspections, and we're going to try to take some shows, if there's a show in an infested zone versus a show in the surveillance zone, and kind of work with people that are traveling in and out. Like you said, the inspection is good for 3 days, and then if they stay longer at a show that's in an infested zone, I mean, these animals, we understand that they're managed a lot more differently than an animal that's just out in the field. So they're looked at, they're treated, they're any kind of little cut, they're treated. So we're gonna assess the risk and go from there. But I mean, we just hope that everybody works with us because we're trying.
I forgot as well, we talked about the market animals, but we also have a pretty large breeding animal component to the livestock shows, and they'll be able to follow the playbook. If you're in an infested zone, you'll have to be inspected, you'll be treated, and then you'll be free to go to the livestock shows. Now, how they're going to determine whether maybe animals from infested zones are sequestered in a certain area of the livestock housing, I think that may be yet to be determined or may be left up to the stock shows themselves. Then we have the issue of going to out-of-state shows, and the playbook can be managed, can help give guidance to manage those cattle for other states accepting them. But I will reiterate that contact with those state veterinarians of the destination show will be imperative for the veterinarians writing the CVI, that because attitudes change, ideas change with this as it's a developing situation. So veterinarians writing CVIs have got to be on their game and checking with these states where these animals' destinations are.
I think there were a couple questions about CVIs before. I don't know if you want, but we have movement certificates, and those are movement for within the state. And then CVIs are moving out of the state, and definitely if veterinarians need to put their eyes on it and really make sure that these animals are good. And then the movement certificate within the state is considered like an add-on, kind of like a rabies certificate for a dog that if is traveling. So we've had that question come up a couple times too.
Okay, perfect. All right, Dr. Susan, what do our equine owners need to be looking for? Owners.
So our equine owners, they're pretty good about going over their horse, brushing them and checking for wounds and everything. But we do have a couple products. We have a spray on, the topical Archon, and the Calral, that's a spray on. There is the Dectamax is injectable for horses for 21 days, so you can use that. I mean, as a practitioner, when I did horses, I did race horses, so they were sensitive. So I try to do the spray on as much as I could.
As a follow-up question to that, so when should we be using our injectables for preventative and treatment purposes?
I think if you see a scratch or a mark on your horse, you treat it right away, do a spray. I feel like if you're going to go into, if you feel like the risk is, the benefits outweigh the risk of doing an injection, you have to know your horse. I mean, if it's a horse that's very sensitive to injections, you give it its regular vaccines and its neck blows up and it's stiff. I mean, maybe that injection might not be for it. But yeah, I would try to case by case. Like horses are sensitive little butterflies, so, you know.
I might add that, yeah, they're a sensitive little butterfly, but there was a time when ivermectin first came on the market and it was marketed for injection in horses. And we had a lot of experience in our practice at that time with clostridiomyositis in those horses. So I am not an equine practitioner anymore, but I have really bad memories of that. And so I would be extremely cautious in using that as a preventative. And that's just coming from Gary Warner. That's not coming from any guidance from anybody else. We had a lot of experience with that back in the early 80s. So I'd express some caution when considering that.
I would like to comment. Can you talk about the passport for the horses? Like in South Texas, in these infested zones, these guys are having to move their horses to go work. And they've been telling me that they have them inspected and they get a 2-week duration certificate or passport or whatever you want to call it. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, we do that pretty much for a lot of the day workers, because they're going from place to place. We will have them inspected, and we will give them like a 14-day pass. It is definitely, we want somebody that definitely uses their horse, looks at their horse. We take it into consideration, because, as you know, some people always abuse the system, but we do offer that for people because we want the day workers to be able to go from place to place. I mean, they really help our economy. They help the ranchers and everything. So yeah, we do offer that.
All right, Dr. Stafford. So our small animal owners are very concerned. What does management of New World Screwworm look like? And what are key messages that veterinarians need to be sharing with their clients?
Thank you for the question. Can I just see a raise of hands of the veterinarians in this group? And then would you also keep your hand raised if you do some extent of companion animal practice? Okay. So one thing I just want to provide some context for is I am an Elanco technical consultant for our companion animal department. We have a whole other food animal department that has been working with our global counterparts. Elanco is a global company, so we have been dealing with New World Screwworm down in Brazil and other countries for quite some time. Since 2022, 2023, if you track New World Screwworm map, you could just see it start migrating through Central America and up through Mexico, kind of just consistently over the last 3 years, knowing that it was a matter of when, not if. And so Elanco food animal side has had a task force looking at this for a long time and is working on a lot of things. Companion animal side, which is where I'm at, we were aware of it. We've been keeping aware of it for about a year now, but we haven't really been that active until end of last year when we did get some approvals, and we can talk about that later. But what I really want to just make sure you guys understand from context is, although I'm here with an Elanco hat on, I still practice emergency medicine in North Dallas. I'm an Army veterinarian. I was deployed to Iraq in 2020, taking care of the military working dogs, and I am board certified in veterinary preventive medicine, which is parasites and infectious disease. So I do have, just understand I wear a lot of veterinary hats, and they're not all Elanco. As far as managing pet owners' concerns, I would look at it from a perspective of educating on what it is, what New World Screwworm is and what it isn't, where it's at and where it's not at. And you guys, I would expect if you guys are here tonight, you probably have good visibility and awareness of your resources out there through USDA and Texas Animal Health Commission. There are phenomenal resources on each of those groups that have information on how to report, where to send pictures. But more importantly, there is a USDA map that shows confirmed New World Screwworm reports. And that is something that I try to keep track of daily just because of my Elanco job. But that is something that you guys can look at least on a weekly basis to keep your companion animal pets up to date, especially if you're in an area of an infected zone. That is really important. They're going to be at higher risk. Dogs and cats in that area are going to be at higher risk. Fly control is going to be so much more important in those areas, especially for outdoor dogs, outdoor cats. And so education of what it is. It's not technically a contagious disease. It's not directly transmissible from animal to human. So just giving some basics of what it is, what it isn't. And for the companion animal world, there is a beautiful, credible website, veterinarypartner.com, that you can print off handouts that is owner language understandable, and it talks about New World Screwworm and treatments and so forth like that. So education, where it is, where it's at, also what to look for on their cats and dogs. And again, this is something, especially if you're close to a zone or in a zone, they need to be looking at these pets very frequently on a daily basis if you are in a zone. Wound management, wounds are going to be very similar to what we deal with regular maggots. These particular are known to have a very foul smell. And we also know that they can get much more expansive and serious because of the live tissue feeding versus our typical maggots that we deal with that typically feed on dead or decaying tissue. So just keep them abreast, look at any change in behavior of your companion animals, cats or dogs. If they have any concerns or suspicions, you know, ask them to call you, come to you, because you're the area where you're supposed to be the most credible resource for these pet owners. And then through you, if you have a suspected case, then they want you to report it. There's also phone numbers and places where you can take pictures and get some consultation through that. Lastly, I'll just say one big difference as far as managing the wounds on our cats and dogs from what we've previously been exposed to with maggots. Because this is a live tissue larvae, they are going to feed deep into the live tissue. And so you're probably going to have deeper wounds, need to collect larval and remove larvae from the deeper part of the wound. Also know that the tricky thing is you can have different species of blowfly maggots in there. And so that's why you really want to be particular if you have a suspicion to get deep in that wound. Thought that was my timer, which I know I'm about up. So, but again, make sure you are collecting deep in the wound, but the rest of it, you're removing them, you're cleaning it, you're flushing it, you're giving analgesia, you're giving antibiotics for infection. And then lastly, you know, historically, we've been used to Night and Pyram or Capstar. We used to use that, and we still use that, but now we have a better, broader isoxazoline drug class that has longer duration of activity. So those are now, there are some that have been conditionally approved and some that have received emergency use approval for New World Screwworm. We can talk about that in a later section, but just know that it is advised that at this point in time with a reportable disease like New World Screwworm that you want to stick with what's been approved by the FDA, USDA, and EPA.
Oh, don't turn off that microphone. I got a follow-up question. So there's been a lot of misinformation out there about what small animal preventatives may or may not be effective. Like, you know, some people think that their ivermectin preventatives for heartworms are going to help their animals. So can you speak to what drugs have been conditionally approved and been emergency use approved?
Yeah, and I will say until I got more immersed in New World Screwworm training and continuing education, I would have expected that many of our parasiticides kind of all have general efficacy. And what I have learned is that by far, this isoxazoline drug class is going to have the best chance for killing very quickly and persisting throughout the month. One thing to be clear, what we currently have approved through conditional approval is Credelio Quattro for dogs. That is the only companion animal drug that currently has conditional approval. Conditional approval, just to be clear on its difference between emergency use approval, conditional approval is a formal approval process through FDA. It's on the path to getting full approval. If you think of the full approval drugs we have, and think of it as a journey. We've completed our journey. Everything's done. We're good to go. Conditional approval, you've made it most of the way through the journey. You have to submit reasonable expectedness of efficacy, safety data, manufacturing quality. So there's a lot that you have to submit and get approval for, but you're not quite all there yet. But the intent and goal is to eventually receive full approval. You have 5 years to do that, but you have to have renewal annually up to that 5 years. Full approval, they have substantial evidence that has shown safety, efficacy, manufacturing quality. So emergency use approval is, there has to be a state of emergency declared for public health. And emergency use approval is not a journey. It's a temporary approval. It's right in the middle of an emergency. And when the emergency is declared gone, the approval goes away. There is still data that needs to be evaluated on risk versus benefit, but the belief is that the efficacy is expected or may be effective, that the data has shown that it may be effective against that target parasite that we're working on in that targeted animal species. So emergency use approval right now, and again, this is evolving, things change, but Credelio cat has emergency use authorization, Credelio dog, NexGard combo, and then the generic form of Nite and Pyram has just recently received that. And the directions on that, if I understand correctly, is they need to have a second dose of that 6 hours after they've received the first dose. Your isoxazolines are all those drugs right now that are approved for companion animal, whether it's the conditional approval or emergency use approval, they are for legally, regulatorily approved for treatment, not prevention. Now, we can't promote off-label use, and it should be used according to its emergency use approval or conditional approval, but just understand that the consensus among boarded veterinary parasitologists and many of the resources that you go to, like Texas AgriLife, they do believe that these isoxazolines are likely going to be preventive also. If you get a fly that lays eggs and the larvae hatch for New World Screwworm, 7 days after you've given the product. There are differences in half-lives of these isoxazolines, and that if we are looking at duration, that can make a difference in efficacy towards the end of the month. But again, right now, just understand that they are all legally approved for treatment only.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. This is kind of a question for everybody. So we've kind of talked a little bit about collecting samples and how important that is for diagnosis. So what are some helpful tips that you have for veterinarians or owners that are going to collect samples from an animal? And we have a collection kit up here that if you haven't got collection kits, you can get those from your extension office. So AgriLife has them. Who else has them? Dr. Womack?
TDA had some that
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
just a tube.
Right. So they have your gloves, they have your alcohol tube, tweezers, paperwork.
And there's a, an old one.
There's an old one.
from-
Could be Vanna.
when Gary was a child. And then there's another one that I got from Copeg, the facility in Panama, that's very similar to the old ones that we used when we were kids. They're simple. They have a vial of alcohol in them and some tweezers.
Yeah.
We can make our own. It's easy. You need a vial of alcohol, some gloves, some forceps, the paperwork. Approved personnel have to fill out the paperwork, right? Correct? Yes, would mean us accredited veterinarians or Animal Health Commission. Okay. Yeah, since it is a foreign animal disease, correct?
Yeah.
All right, gotcha. Tips for collecting samples. The deepest part of the wound. Remember, most of those wounds they're not like what we would call fleece worms, where the maggots are moving laterally. They're deep, so you have to go in and you have to physically remove those from the deep portion of the wound. I'm gonna tell you, when I was a kid, we used to use baling wire and make a loop out of them and drag them out of the deepest portion of the. It was brought to my attention there's not much baling wire around anymore, so that might be forceps might be better, tweezers might be better.
Yeah, or go buy a roll of hot wire, right?
Yeah.
Your experience in Panama,
Yes.
did they find that killing the larvae before they extract them?
The question was, does
Good.
killing the larvae first make it easier to extract? They pull some out of the center first, and then they use Megasont powder to kill them. Oh yeah, it's the go-to product down there. They kill them. It's a coumaphos with a sulfa in it, and it's very effective at killing them. They will drag some more out, and try to, if they have to put Megasont powder on the ground on top of the maggots, you do not want those maggots alive on the ground. I would even suggest, if you were going to collect maggots, to take a tarp
Take a
and
tarp.
put
like
it
a
underneath
concrete-
the animal before, so you can collect all the maggots that fall out of that wound.
Say 70% alcohol is good. 90% kind of deteriorates the maggot. I heard one guy ask me if he could use Everclear. I probably wouldn't go that far. I mean, I don't know.
Do y'all have the Negasont powder? Is it was supposed to be dispensed?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, well, luckily I probably don't know what the can of worms is because I'm on the companion animal side. But what I can tell you is that Negasont powder is an Elanco product, and it currently is approved in other countries. Right now, the USDA has ordered it for the US, but it's going to be limited in distribution. It's going to be used through the National Veterinary Stockpile. And then Zach, do you have anything else to add to that? He's our kind of our food animal summer intern. He's a vet student here at Texas Tech.
So Negasont powder is listed on USDA website as far as emergency use authorization, but only accessible through the authorized personnel, I think veterinarian, to send in the report and request some from the stockpile. And then another similar product, Tanadil, will also be added to that list as well, held by the National Veterinary Stockpile.
I'm in an infested zone, and that is unavailable to me right now.
Maybe
Poor Zach says he's just a vet student and he doesn't
Yeah.
make the rules.
maybe somebody listening to this webinar tonight will kick this up the chain. And we have invested zones here now that if other people have good experience with this in other countries, why is it not already available to us?
I will say that that is not on Elanco. That is through the USDA. Stephanie, did you have something that you know that is valuable in this conversation?
Yeah, so just to repeat for our people online. So what Elanco representative from the audience was saying is that USDA is in contract with Elanco to produce it in Mexico. And once it gets to the US, it will hopefully come online. Sorry. All right, where were we? Helpful tips. Helpful tips to collection. Oh, good times. So if a veterinarian didn't chase the squirrel, like who would trust us?
We're going to catch that rascal.
One of these days. And so helpful tips. So I don't think people understand how deep these wounds have. So should veterinarians be thinking about having to sedate an animal to really get deep into these wounds? Can you comment on that?
Absolutely, especially our small animals. I showed some people earlier a video of a dog in Panama that had him in his ear, and he had to be anesthetized obviously you're not going to get them out of the ear. I proper restraint. You got to have personnel safety too. The by far and large, the most common area that's going to have an active myiasis is going to be the umbilicus. So whether you're talking about a calf or a kid goat or lamb or pen raised fawns, exotic hoof stock, whatever, we need to restrain those animals and be aware that everybody needs to be safe. So proper restraint, a tarp or some kind of hard surface under the animal with the myiasis, the equipment to pull the larva out of the deepest portion of the myiasis, the vials to put the maggots in. They're even suggesting now to take 10 or 12 larvae, put them in the vial, and also take another 10 or 12 and put them in another vial, or refrigerate them, freeze them, something, in case the initial submission is lost. Am I correct in that?
So in certain areas, we are having mobile labs, and we'll have somebody pick them up and bring them to the lab, have a quick ID. They're, like highly suspect. And NVSL is the only place that definitely confirms it. So it will go to a mobile lab if it's close enough. And then from there, go on to NVSL. We try not to have the specimens lost, but it happens. We don't control, our mail carrier. But yeah, it does happen, unfortunately. But luckily, we'll have an entomologist at these smaller labs, these mobile labs, that will help out. And we've been taking pictures and stuff also, so that if something does happen to the specimen, we do have a backup.
I have a quick question follow-up for you. For the producers and veterinarians in the room, I'll speak on behalf of myself. When I went digging to find out how it's reported, how to collect samples, where to submit, there's a lot of information out there. I ended up seeing that there's both a phone number for Texas Animal Health Commission and then a phone number for USDA APHIS. But if we communicate through our state vet and the Texas Animal Health, then you basically collaborate with USDA APHIS and submit the samples there? Or do you have a source of one site that these folks can go to? Because again, there's so much information on collection, submission. My understanding was when you contact your state or federal authority, they can kind of hold your hand and walk you through the paperwork and all of that.
So Texas Animal Health Commission, we do livestock pretty much, but Screwworm, we are the primary reporting entity of Screwworm. We are working with USDA. This is for Texas. I mean, because Texas, we're taking charge, right? So in the ICP, we are right alongside USDA, and our people go out with a USDA person and meet the producer and collect the information. And we start the epidemiological survey and try to find out if there's any animals that traced in, traced out, where is it just from the flying its normal route. But with small animal, we are asking that, like, the animal will go to the vet clinic, and then that vet will contact Texas Animal Health Commission. We have region offices, and then they call our office, and we line up with USDA and get your foreign animal disease number, and we'll get a shipping label, and we'll talk to you about collection and how to send it out. But because the small animal community is so large that we cannot go out to each small animal house and pick up the maggot, so we do ask that the vets help out, and we will, a lot of them call. We have an after hours 24-hour number that we'll get vets that call all the time, and we provide information to them. So we try to be readily available. It's just a little bit we're just only so many of us. We can't do all the small animals also. So we do rely on our small animal vet counterparts.
That's helpful. Thank you. And the other thing I'll just say too, for your awareness, if you weren't already aware, the adult flies look like other blowflies. So it's very hard for us to be able to distinguish. In fact, I thought I saw a picture of another blowfly the other day in a manual, and I thought, oh, that's it, because it had the 3 stripes, the orange eyes, like. But there are more, I would say, very small differences that are going to be hard for the average person or the average vet to pick up. And that also is for the larvae as well. And that's why they really, really encourage reporting for professional specialists to identify. But you also can take pictures that will help as well. Do you have people sending pictures in to you before they officially give a FAD number?
I mean, we do like to get pictures. I will say we probably are not accepting flies because we are getting so many maggots, we can't do it. And also a lot of times people kill the fly and then we get this mush and we just really can't tell anything by that. You know, it does, but it will clog the system. You know, like we open up the box, we take the time to open up, do the paperwork and everything. And then you look and you're like, oh, this is not able to be distinguished from anything. So we're just really trying to do maggots right now because then at least the maggots we know are in an animal and in an area, whereas a fly, you catch a fly, it could have, we don't know where it came from.
Right. And I think it's really important to remember that the female fly spends very little time on the animal, and it is very unlikely for you to see them. They have, they come in, they lay their eggs, and they're gone to shrubbery bushes. So the chances of you seeing a female fly on an animal is very, very slim. So that is probably not our greatest source of information. That's going to be that larvae, which is why that is what Texas Animal Health Commission really wants. All right. So Dr. Womack, question for you. So we've talked about cattle, we've talked about small animal, we've talked a little bit about equine. So coming from your part of the world, what can our small ruminant producers really think about for management plans that they need to put in place, especially thinking about you know, the season's kind of come and gone, but we're still shipping lambs, and also thinking about lambing and kidding season coming next year when we're still going to have New World Screwworm.
Did I ever mention controlling the breeding season? That would be, that's paramount. And again, the ship's already sailed right now. So what can they do now? Observe, spend a little more time out. The wildlife people, they talk about putting cameras up. Could we put cameras up around waters and mineral feeders and things like that for our small ruminants? Well, sure. If there's something that looks off, if you can't get there in a timely manner, could that fill a gap? Well, sure it could. Sure it could. Excuse me. There's if you look at this, the positives in our part of the world, a bunch of them are castration sites and tail docks. People are shearing. People are working lambs, working kid goats. If we're gonna process them, you know, take some corrective measures. You had a question earlier about when would you use a preventative, an anti-parasitic drug. Could we use ivermectin at that time? Ivermectin's conditionally labeled or for emergency use for prevention of New World Screwworm. So could we incorporate that into our processing system? Well, sure you could. Could you not dock their tails? Well, sure. Billy goats, not castrating billy goats. If you don't castrate a billy goat kid and he's 3 months old, you're not going to control that breeding season. So that's a double-edged sword right there that people are going to have to make an economic decision. Are they willing to go ahead and market those lambs and kid goats earlier? I still think planning for the future is going to be paramount to the success of a sheep and goat producer. I thought this would be here last August, September. We changed our breeding seasons on our sheep and goats last year.
Right.
So we have one breeding season instead of a spring and fall now.
Right.
So
anything else to add on that?
on sheep and goats, observe, control your breeding season.
Plan for management. Have a management plan.
Have a management plan. And then if we do have to process, again, that's that judgment call right there.
Right.
Cover the wounds, use Catron as a prevention, spray around the wounds, administer a antiparasitic like ivermectin. If you're bobbing tails, I use an electric cartery. I carterize the lamb's tails. Could you band them? Well, you're still creating a wound, but banding is an option. There's still some old small ruminant Burdizos kicking around. You have to be skilled and talented to use a Burdizo, correct? But that was why they invented the Burdizos, to mitigate the screwworms.
So Dr. Warner, question for you. So we mentioned the umbilicus of our neonates several times. We know that about 60% of myiasis cases are going to be in the umbilicus, and so that's a high prevalence site. So what are some things that veterinarians and producers can do to help prevent those infections in those neonates?
Well, first thing is, once again, vigilance and looking after those newborns. We're advocating in our practice, it's kind of an off-label thing, but to try to apply products to dry that navel out as quickly as possible. We have played with several different products. Of course, iodines are out there and have been used for a long time. I'm not a big fan of those. We're using mixture of chlorhexidine solution and isopropyl alcohol, 50-50. And so far, in limited numbers, that does seem to get that navel a lot drier, a lot quicker. And then, of course, applying Catron spray on the area. And we're going to use Dectomax as a preventative. And hopefully within the 3-week time span, those umbilicus are healed appropriately so that they don't need a retreatment. However, if weather is not cooperative and we've got high humidity and moist conditions, we may have to come back and give those calves a second dose to try to prevent that. And still, vigilance is key. Even though you've treated them preventatively, you're still going to have to check them because there's going to be some breakthroughs.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, Dr. Susan. So there's been quite a bit of misinformation circulating around on the good old Book of Faces and Instagram and the tic-tac, as some people call it. So about what happens when an infested zone is declared. So can you explain to everybody what happens when the infested zone is indeed declared and what animal movement looks like within an infested zone and maybe an adjacent surveillance zone as well?
Sure. So the infested zone we'll get a positive ID. So then we declare an infested zone and we do a 12-mile circle, and that's based on how the fly flies or the maximum distance it can fly. So we do the circle. It's also based on geography, also property lines, because if we divide somebody's ranch in half, all of a sudden all their animals just miraculously are on the other side of the infested zone. So we do go by property lines and we try to make sure that it makes sense. So it might not be a perfect circle, but we do try. We look at a lot of factors in that. And then we have the surveillance zone around. And the surveillance zone is we talk to producers, we hand out cards, and we try to just inform everyone that they are next to an infested zone. And then to go from an infested zone out, we ask that there's appropriate treatment on the animal because we don't want anything harboring maggots to go out. And then we ask for a inspection and yeah, so that's pretty much what we do. And is there anything else?
In the infested zone,
Yes,
the index case is going to be treated,
yes.
okay?
Mhm.
What's the duration of, when we treat the index case in that
Mhm.
infested zone? Is that 21 days?
So, it's just when myiasis is resolved. So once we treat the animal and we make sure that there's no more maggots, then the clock starts for
And
inactivity.
what is that? What's
And-
that time frame?
And then we do 21 days.
We do 21 days for that index animal.
Yes.
What about the infested zone?
So the infested zone, that's going to depend on if there's other cases, but the infested zone, based on the playbook, I think they're talking about 90 days. So,
So if the 90 days starts with that index case,
well, then if we get another case,
then it resets.
yeah, then it
Okay.
resets. Yeah.
That was my question.
Awesome.
Dr. Susan, I have another question on companion animal. I know that the Texas Animal Health Commission is mainly focused on livestock, but you guys are the kind of subject matter experts right now for all things New World Screwworm. Are you aware of any restrictions on movement of cats and dogs across Texas state border? And yes, just across the state border. Are there any restrictions? And for anybody that is, maybe there's a lot of stuff right now on social media, people not wanting to take animals from Texas. So what would you say on those things?
I mean, you definitely, to leave the state, you have to contact the state that you're going to. I mean, that's what all the vets with the CVIs have to do. And then even we talk to people about bringing their pets into infested zones. We get calls all the time that somebody wants to bring their dogs and they want to go hiking and spend time at the park, and it's in an infested zone and all these things. I mean, I'm not going to say you can't, but you want to be prepared. You want your animal on a treatment, things like that. And the other thing I wanted to say is that we were seeing, we did have a case of a dog that was positive. It was a guardian livestock animal. So people overlook those animals. So we definitely make sure that their guardian livestock dogs are taken care of.
Dr. Stafford, so you talked a little bit about emergency use authorization versus conditionally approved labels on our pharmaceutical drugs, but can you talk a little bit about how that impacts how we use those drugs, and what limitations are put on us as veterinarians with those labels on those drugs?
Yeah, so how it impacts us is from when we're dealing with a reportable disease. I know full approval, when we use things extra label all the time, we probably use more stuff extra label than we do on label. And that is absolutely okay at our discretion with full approved drugs. When it comes to emergency use authorization and or conditional approval, those are going to be a little bit more highly regulated. And so at this point in time, not only do we not have data to support other parasiticides, because we know that the market is super saturated with tons of different ingredients that are considered parasiticides, but the data support what is currently being conditionally approved or emergency use approval. So when we have those products available, not only from a medical standpoint, but from a regulatory standpoint, you shouldn't stray outside of those at this point. And most of us have an isoxazoline in our hospital whether it's, I mean, if you don't have NexGard, Nexgo Combo, or Credelio Cat Dog, or Credelio Quattro, and you have owners that do have concerns, or you're in an infested zone, taking my Elanco hat off, I would definitely get them on one of the approved, either conditional or emergency use approval drugs, ASAP, if you're in an infested zone. Did that answer the question?
To talk about the extra label use and how that really tied our hands about extra label use. So thank you. Here on the hot zone again. So can you define for us what is the difference between an active versus an inactive case? And how does that apply to an infested zone classification?
Okay, so the active case is, it was a case that we saw myiasis. We have a positive identification of the maggot. That's an active case. And then treatment starts, and then an inactive case is after the 21 days, and the wound is no myiasis. It can still be present. That was kind of a discussion, is does the wound have to be fully healed or not? But our idea of no active disease is no active maggots in the wound. So the clock started that time. So then an inactive case is after the 21 days. And then we talked the surveillance zone and the infested zone. The infested zone is, I mean, it really depends on if we get more cases, but it's about 90 days.
Yeah. And is there other ways that it can go from active to inactive, such like?
Oh, well, it can die. Yes. I mean, it would be inactive if the animal passes away or is euthanized. So, I mean, we had cases where people thought that they were screwworms and they euthanized them. They took the maggots and they weren't screwworms. So definitely it's treatable. So definitely get an identification before just euthanizing your animal.
Just add, when we treat these initially, in discussions with others that are in endemic countries such as Brazil. I had a conference call with some veterinarians from down there, and this isn't a one and done deal. You have an animal with an active infection, you treat it, and you remove all the larvae from it. Then that animal has to be a follow-up, and those veterinarians reiterated time and again that cleanliness is extremely important, that continued nursing care of those wounds are extremely important. And in endemic areas where there's a relatively high screwworm fly population, those will get reinfested, those wounds. So when we talk about vigilance being key, it really is, and follow-up on wound care on those affected animals is paramount to helping resolve the issue in them. And I just want to clarify that.
When I was a kid, a lot of the ranches in our part of the world had wormy traps. They would find a calf or a sheep or a goat in the pasture. They would bring them up, around the headquarters, and they would put them in a wormy trap so they could follow up. And they would follow up treating them. Back then, they used Smear 62 and a cadre of other things. But once they were healed, then they left the wormy trap. So kind of an infested zone, and then they got to be released. But it was all common sense, seat of the pants type stuff.
Yeah, I mean, definitely if they get another infestation, I mean, they can get it again. I mean, just treating them one time isn't going to be done.
Right. All right. So this question for everybody. So any final comments or thoughts on development of management and treatment plans that we didn't cover yet?
have a question for the panel. So this, the way I understand it, even though this is an obligate parasite of living flesh, what I've learned in the research is that that's really for the first instar larvae. But if the animal dies during, let's say it dies because it's been infested for a while, but it's had more and more fly lay eggs that are being hatched in the larvae feeding, that the later stage larvae can feed off of dead tissue and continue the life cycle. Is that correct?
You want to take that one?
You can take.
Okay, so the latter stage of the second instar and the third, for a while after that animal dies, can they still continue? And there's some studies that I saw that said the second stage could actually stay on a fresh carcass long enough to reach the early third stage. That third stage is what's going to drop off to the ground and pupate and start the cycle back over. You go back to the deal in Florida in 16, and they were having deer die. The Parks and Wildlife Department of Florida was taking those deer and they were pitching them in a bone pile. They weren't mitigating the maggots on those carcasses, and they perpetuated the thing until they realized. They did that for almost 3 months before they realized that they were screwworms. So short answer is yep. Realistically, that's a pretty special circumstances. And think about the Florida Keys. It's going to be high humidity, warm temperatures. Those carcasses, that's going to stay mammalian, close to mammalian temperature for a bit. And they did perpetuate some. But largely, roadkill, a normal deer gets run over on the road, the screwworm flies are not going to come and lay eggs on that wound and expect that those larvae aren't going to perpetuate. Fair enough? Okay. Was that close?
Yeah.
Would you agree? Okay. What was the question?
Did we chase another squirrel?
Yeah, that's squirrels.
And we need to mention that that screwworm is rather sensitive to temperature, both low and high. And from my understanding is once we get ambient temperatures above 105 or so, that their activity really slows down, or at least the mature fly activity slows way down.
I would agree. From what I know, I would agree with that. Cold temperatures are bad. Extremely hot and dry temperatures are bad.
So question was, any final comments or thoughts on developing management and treatment plans that we didn't cover yet this evening?
Well, we talked about the neonates, but then we also got to talk about the females having the neonates.
Right.
That they are extremely vulnerable, particularly the female reproductive parts, particularly even more so if they have placental retention. From what I'm told is the screwworm fly really likes to retain placenta. And so those will need to be preventatively treated. Probably all females that are having young are going to have to be protected somehow. And I also asked a question because I was very concerned because part of my specialty in my practice is bulls and infertility and injury, but that an intact prepuce is not real fair game for a screwworm fly, but an injured prepuce is. So is that?
Absolutely. I would agree with both of those statements. We talked a little bit about management, and I do these talks and I always get the question, well, Dectomax works every works for 3 weeks. We'll just gather everything up and give them a shot of Dectomax every 3 weeks. That's a terrible idea. Let's not do that. Multitudes of different reasons, but resistance, parasite resistance being pretty high on the list. But when we want to think about prevention, just like Dr. Warner said, don't forget about reproduction. What if we're preg checking? Are we going to create wounds? Yeah, sometimes. Would that be a good time to give them a shot of Dectomax? Absolutely. I did a bunch last week, and we gave them all Dectomax. The guy needed to deworm them anyway. What about when we're OCVing heifers? Are we going to create a wound? We're going to put a tag in there. We're going to give them an injection. We're going to put a tattoo in them. Is that a good time to give them Dectomax? You bet. Would that be a squirt of Catron on the tag? You bet.
Yeah.
What about when we're trick testing bulls? Do we ever get blood? Yeah. Would that be a good time?
Yeah.
What about the rectal probe? Do you ever get blood on the rectal probe?
Yeah.
Is that yeah. What about when you're AIing? Do you ever get blood? Yeah. All those times would be a good time to administer an antiparasitic.
Yeah. So being really strategic about when we do our animal husbandry, what can we lump together, and how can we protect it? Because we know that resistance to doramectin and ivermectin it happens, right? In Central and South America, we've already seen resistance to doramectin and ivermectin. And so being vigilant with those products and then thinking about what if we use those products inappropriately and we have a whole pile of intestinal parasites that are resistant to those products, what do we have left, right, in the cabinet? So.
And then to open another can of worms, in my conversations with those folks that are in endemic areas of the world, the tick is their number one concern. That they find that ticks and tick bite lesions are the perfect environment for an attractant for the screwworm. So that we in our practice area have seen a resurgence in ear ticks and Gulf Coast ticks. And that's of great concern because we're not really being able to control those wounds in a very timely manner. So I just throw that out there for everybody to be aware that we may have an initiator, a meiosis, and not be able to recognize it.
Integrated pest management's huge. So controlling your ticks, controlling your other biting flies, is that important? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other thoughts before we open it up to the audience? All right. We'll take some questions from the audience.
Okay, Dr. Warner, we're in the sharing crew. We are sharing our hair goats. And when you get how you get nicks there, what is your recommendation? When I was a kid, we doctored them with an old black paste that supposedly kept the flies off for a day or two. Now, what's your recommendation?
Well, if you're an infested zone and somebody gets this Negasunt powder, I would say that Negasunt powder would be ideal to put on those wounds. But since we don't have that, there's another product that supposedly is available called F10 that would probably, and they have two forms, both the spray and an ointment. I don't know anything about it other than the fact that it is approved for treatment and prevention of screwworms. Catron spray would be another one. You could spray those, and then I'd Dectomax them. Absolutely. No, and I'd say, but I caution everybody that Dectomax is not a do-all. I mean, we're still going to have to do wound management, and in particular, in that situation, it's going to happen, and those wounds need to be treated and protected as well. And I might mention, while it's on my mind for our equine folks out there, that from what research that I could do, although I had to dig a little bit for it, a screwworm fly can lay her eggs, and they can hatch as soon as a day. And so bandaging wounds on horses, it's really difficult when those flies want to get to a wound to keep them out. And that's probably going to have to put folks in being very vigilant and actually bandaging horses every day to make sure that they don't get involvement. Just FYI.
I had a man send me a recipe for, it was his granddad's Tocoli mix, the black paint. It was wild. I can't repeat it in this forum here, but he had a very specific multi-step recipe for making Tocoli, the old oil to paint shearing in the shearing pens is what they did. You remember the shearers would cry out to little kids, Tocoli, Tocoli, Tocoli. You had to come paint the wounds that they created, or the lamb's tails when they bobbed them.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all the good experience and knowledge. I'm an animal nutritionist, so I have been interested to improve the general skin gut barrier integrity or general health and improve the recovery. Do you think this direction is really useful to prevent from the NWS in the more a preventative way, changing the amino acid or fatty acid, those kind of things? Do you think is useful way to control?
From a nutritional standpoint?
In the gut, the skin barrier integrity, skin health, do you think that's the good way to control the NWS in the more population, in the control the instant rate?
You're the nutritionist. You tell me. What do you think? Could that be helpful? Correct. Right. If you can come up with an innovative idea, I'm all ears, my friend. You tell me if we can improve the skin barrier nutritionally, absolutely. Why wouldn't that be something that this is not going away. You got plenty of time. It's not going to go away in a year or two. So I would encourage you, if you think that that's worth pursuing, by all means pursue it. This has wide-ranging ramifications. You go from here south all the way to northern Argentina. It's an issue. So I would encourage you, absolutely look at it.
Clay Rollins from Vega, Texas. Nobody's talked about X-Halt and the use of it, use for on cattle and their grooming habits, work in ingestion, but use on other animals and the Alphalander family. What's going on here?
The conditional license, the CA1 license, prevents us as veterinarians from going off label. It'd be illegal. We'd put our licensure in jeopardy. It's got the label is for 2 indications: fever ticks, which up here we're not in the fever tick zone. If we're in an infested zone, could we use it? Could we prescribe it? Yes, we could. Going off label with it, verboten. I mean, we cannot do that because of that conditional license. If it was a fully approved product for ticks in general, can we go off label? Yes, but it is not. It's conditionally approved right now, and our hands as veterinarians are tied. You agree with that?
Thanks. Really good comments here. Britt Conklin from the school. Dr. Susan, I'm interested to know from a public perspective if you think the terminology active, inactive, surveillance, and infested kind of gets confused at times. I mean, we all find it a little interesting that you're not finding flies whatsoever, And so to move from a surveillance zone to not becoming a surveillance zone, are you using active and inactive cases to determine that? You said 90 days, but is it realistic to say that that blue county is totally free of the fly because you haven't been able to pick any of them up? Does that make sense?
Yes. So the infested zone is like a 12-mile circle around the positive animal. And then the blue zone is the surveillance zone that we're just letting people know. I mean, we might not see the fly there, but we're letting people know to keep an eye out for the fly. And I do think maybe terminology is maybe confusing because this isn't something that people see every day and deal with every day. So these and it's a fly. So these are all new concepts for people. We haven't had this for a while, so.
So, and I think people in general know, but maybe not the general public, why are we finding larvae and we're not finding flies?
Well, I think the flies hide. I don't think that it's very common to see the fly there. I mean, maybe you can comment more on the fly.
Yeah, Britt, the environmental density of the screwworm fly is extremely low. Why can we control it with sterile flies? We can overwhelm the population because the population in the environment is extremely low. They're ninja flies. They hide out in the dark. They wait for a susceptible host to come by with a fresh wound. They go and do their job, and then they leave. You talk to the ARS researchers that are trying to develop a bait, an attractant that is attractive to the female screwworm fly, and it's extremely difficult. She wants a fresh wound. You can do all kinds of stuff, but it's difficult to replicate that fresh the volatile chemicals that are coming off that fresh wound. Correct. Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to replicate that. So I question the traps too. I mean, they're so far we haven't caught a fly in a trap.
Haven't caught a fly in the trap, so, but they're out there because we have maggots.
Again, it's not a contagious disease. It's an environmental disease. That first index case it wasn't, despite what the press says, it wasn't a 3-week-old calf, because I know the guy. He's a friend of mine. It was a 3-day-old calf, 50 miles north of the border. How did that happen? That meant those flies were in that environment already when that calf hit the ground. So there's a lot of semantics in these terms, and some of them go back to the legal register and how you have to call quarantine zones, infested zones, and things like that. And I agree with you; it gets very confusing, and I have heartburn over it as well. But it all boils down to what it is in the legal register and the description of these movement controls.
Companion animal question. If I have a patient, I can't use the isosceline class of drugs if we get this up in this area for seizures or other issues. Besides Capstar, what do I give for prevention if I've got dogs that come in with wounds and those kind of things?
Yeah, so right now there is nothing approved for prevention. So the isoxazoline drug class is based upon the pharmacology of those drugs is expected to be preventative, but right now there is nothing officially labeled. I think that's a bit of a conundrum because the isoxazoline drug class, there is no similar drug class to that. I mean, we have our macrocyclic lactones, but I would say just do your risk versus benefit assessment from a standpoint of not all dogs that have seizures will have seizures on these isoxazolines. And some dogs that have never had a history of seizures will have one within 24 hours of the isoxazoline. So if they are a known neuroreactor to the isoxazoline drug class, then that changes your risk versus benefit assessment. But if they have a history of seizures, but you're not aware that they would necessarily have an issue on the isoxazoline, it's a discussion with the owner, because if they're very worried about New World Screwworm or you're in an infested zone, then the benefit may outweigh the risks. And as far as that goes, I don't have any further data, to be helpful from a preventative standpoint. And that data is yet to come.
Okay, I'm a producer, cattle producer. My first question is, why is it designated New World Screwworm? Is there a difference in screwworms?
We live in the new world comparative to the old world. The North American continent, it was described in French Guiana, I believe, initially was the first description made by a French physician in a penal colony. And he was having inmates brought to him, and these parasites were eating these patients. He was standing in the New World, and they designated it the New World Screwworm. They named it Cochleomyia hominovirax, which literally translates, the hominovirax means man-eater. It was this was a human problem when it was first described by a scientist. New World, yes, they have old world screwworms, but we're living in a new world, and it's not a new world screwworm. It's the same screwworm that's been around here since the beginning of time. Before we were, yes. Good question, though.
Thank you. The normal activities that we do to control flies, does it help in control of the screwworm?
Absolutely. Would it help prevent wounds? Would it help prevent ticks? You got horn flies all over them. What are they going to do? They're going to get up under a mesquite tree and start scratching. Are they going to create wounds? Yeah. Would IGR help in your feed? Everybody, I'm feeding IGR. I don't have to worry about screwworms. Would that help? Absolutely. To reduce the number of horn flies. Will it do anything against a screwworm? No. But integrated pest management means the whole shebang there. Everything that we're doing, I spray my cattle during the summer for horn flies. We spray them in Slacker County for ticks in the summer. That's something we already do. Is that helpful? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Good producers are going to be least affected by this. The people that aren't taking care of business, that aren't controlling their breeding season, they're not vigilant. They may see their cattle one time a week. They're going to be, unfortunately, more negatively impacted by this than a good producer. Can a good producer get better? Can you do things that make your management better? If you can, if you don't want to, then you're going to be going backwards. So a good producer can adapt and adjust their management techniques, and they will be, in the long run, least affected by this thing.
Okay, you were talking about the breeding season. I must understand from what you're saying is early spring for calves and so forth.
In this part of the world, absolutely. What did I tell my kids in Panama? They're equatorial. They don't have winter down there. I told them to shorten their breeding season. They can concentrate their efforts when they have a shorter calving season then. Could they move those cattle up into traps where they're easier to observe? Yeah, sure. Did they have to hire extra help? If you're only doing it for 60 days instead of 120 days or 365 days, that makes sense, right? The best producers down there have 90-day breeding seasons. And I talked to one of them, and I'm walking around, I'm looking, and hey, these calves look great. They're pretty uniform. He goes, yeah, we're real proud. We got a 90-day breeding season, but you know what? I'd like to get it down to 60. And I said, you know, I can help you. Let's talk about this. He's a good producer, and he's going to be the less affected by the screwworms in the long run. So that makes sense. If we can manage it here, we have winter. That's neat. That's really cool. If you're a fall calving herd, can you push it back a little bit? If you're calving in September, can you go to October, maybe November? Yeah, that's pretty easy. If you're calving in April and May, can you bring that to March and February? I calve in February and March. I'm bringing mine to January and February already. And we've already implemented some techniques to do that. My sheep and goats, we already changed our breeding seasons to kid and lamb in the winter. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Definitely. Another question was, you said our best prevention is eyes on. Are we looking for when we're walking through, you look for an open wound? Is that basically what we're talking about? And I understand it also has a very distinctive smell also.
Yeah, yes, it does. Yeah, things that look out of the ordinary, they're going to feel bad. Everybody says, "Oh, I cake my cows 3 days a week. I'm going to catch them." Well, you better be counting when you're caking, because the ones that really have a bad myiasis, they're going to be brushed up. They're not going to come up. They're going to feel bad. So you need to be thinking, if you're calving, this cow looks like she calved. Where's her baby? You need to start looking. When I was a kid, people had border collies that would find them brushed up. They could smell them. I had one old guy claim he had a gelding that would take him to brushed up wormies, calves, lambs, kid goats, whatever. So looking at them, they're going to feel bad. Wounds that look strange. The index case, the very first case, I was talking to that guy, and he had an oops. He had a bull get in with some heifers, and they didn't know they were bred until they started bagging up and springing a little bit. So he segregated those. He had half a dozen of them, and he put them in a field so he could watch them more carefully to see if they were hung up having trouble. And he said his hands called him and said, "Hey, one of those calves got a funny looking navel." It was still running with his mama as a Bremer cross. You know, you can hit it in the head. It's not really going to show you anything, but it looked funny. It looked funny. And his hand said, "Hey, this thing looks funny." Called the boss, and he comes in there, and he's a little bit older than I am, and he grew up in Sonora, so he grew up treating screwworms, and he's like, "Oh my God." Took a picture of it and sent it to me, and I said, "Oh my God, please let's turn it in." But it looked weird. The calf wasn't sick. If it progresses, think about it. It's feeding on live tissue, and they're going to feel bad. So you're going to have to be looking, shaking their heads if it's in their ears, kicking at their belly if it's a bull or a steer calf and it's up in his sheath. Just something ain't right. Say something. Look at it. If you have to look at it, just like talking to pen riders, if you have to look at them twice, you looked at that calf twice, maybe there's something wrong. So that makes sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, I will say that the ones that we've gotten so far that are the positives, they are very slightly, the umbilicus is slightly swollen, and somebody will say, "Hey, it just doesn't look quite right. The calf is kicking a little bit at its belly." The sheep that we got, just they were castrated. It just didn't heal as fast as they usually are. So, I mean, our producers are really good, and they're really keeping their eyes on everything, and they're catching them really early. I will say the ones that we've seen haven't smelled because they've been so early. So just don't wait for the smell. Like, really look at your animals, check the wounds, check the castration site, the dehorning areas, like anything. But we have really good people.
Okay, so the question I had was, we've talked about what kind of temperatures these adult flies can tolerate, but the pupa, kind of what kind of temperatures can they tolerate, and what does that mean for survivability and overwintering, as it seems like these cases are moving north?
The stuff I've heard, 48 degrees and below soil temperature, you can forget it. I was told below 60 degrees, the activity of the adult flies really, really decrease. They like it warm. They like it moist, high humidity, and warm temperature. Again, Dr. Warner brought up the over 100 degrees. They don't like it over 100 degrees, but they don't like it below 60 either.
But no, yes, because historically, I'm not as old as you, Doc. How far north did it go though? Back in the 40s and 50s, it was the Dakotas, was it not? But we're foolish to think that because we're a little further north here in the Panhandle, that it's going to take a long time to get here.
They say I-40 is kind of the line in the sand, but it's according weather is a big mandate for them as far as how far their activity goes. Of course, the overwinter zone is going to be South Texas, but it's just according to how progressive our environment is for them as to how far they progress, from what I understand. No comment.
Could it get to Canada? You bet your butt, but it's going to go on a truck. Yeah. This whole problem, we didn't undo 50 years worth of control in 3 years naturally. This came from south to north, but it came on a truck or on a barge. Yeah. Or in a group that was herded north. Can it, again, I-40, I agree. That's I-40 and south, Mesquite line, south to northern Argentina. But yeah, there was old reports of up in the Dakotas and then up on the Missouri, up on the East Coast too. I had a guy the other day pile into me because he said, well, I grew up in northern Missouri and we treated screwworms all the time. Okay, fair enough. So it can get there, but it's going to be incursions. They're not going to go up there and establish in the Dakotas because the winters are too cold.
As a follow-up on that, how long can the pupae actually survive in the soil?
That's a question I don't have the exact answer to, but so the sterile flies, they're making them in Panama, right? They're radiating the pupa. They're keeping them in the pupal form. They're putting them in a big styrofoam cooler with ice, put them on an airplane and fly them to Moore. And then they can keep them for a little while. I really don't know what I don't think it can overwinter if the temperature gets down.
I looked at this, but it's been a while. And so they overwinter in the ground, but the ground can't freeze. So wherever it gets where the ground doesn't freeze down past 2 inches or so, they can survive and they overwinter that way and come back in the spring when it warms up. But if the ground freezes significantly, they can't survive. The pupae can't survive, is the best I can tell you from what I remember.
I have from another talk, the pupae stage is 6 to 8 days roughly. So I don't know.
The pupa stage is 6 to 8 days, but they can live in the ground for much, like they can hibernate.
And that 21-day life cycle, or 19 if you're on the closer to the equator. The pupal stage is about, más o menos a week. So yeah, that's correct. That's in the active time of year.
That's under best temperatures and humidity of what they like. 6 to 8 days is at best what you're going to get, but it can be weeks to months, pending the temperature. Yeah. I was also going to add, I apologize for not knowing the source, but if you guys are familiar with Dr. Susan Little, she practiced, or she was a professor at Oklahoma State University, boarded veterinary parasitologist. She just recently did a talk on New World Screwworm, and she actually had a map, a historical map from the 1960s where they mapped out the United States of where it was at, and like it had zones or lines that went lateral across the map. And they did track it fairly high. Again, it's endemic in the United States. We eradicated it through our sterile fly technique, but it is naturally here in North America, or I should say in the US. It thrives here. It thrives under better humidity and temperatures, but it can definitely, over warmer months, be in the northern states as well.
Any final questions from the audience?
In the Livestock Weekly, they were talking about disposal of animals. And one of the comments was burying the remains at least 4 foot down and packing. Any other comments for ones that have died, or the owners call and suspect it, but don't have it in? What do you recommend?
Burning. Do we have a list of environmental? Yeah, there's some approved topicals that you could use. I know what I would use, and it starts with an O and ends with an Al. Just saying.
I mean, we've had people, they spray the wounds that are with Cantron spray and get rid of the maggots for screwworm. And then once the animal is dead, I mean, it's not going to be the screwworm fly. It doesn't want to go into it. And then they've burnt it, or they will compost it. But they do treat the wound first and kind of get rid of it. But you said no?
Wouldn't come.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's what they do.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I don't know if it's going to get hot enough. I don't know. Have to be a pretty hot compost. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So burning it, good old pear burner. It's 4 feet deep in our part of the world. It's pretty hard to do some places. So what do we have? We got mesquite and a pear burner and set it on fire. I've heard of people using malathion. Again, I don't know if that's approved. I've heard of people using Coral. Again, don't know if that would be approved. Put it in, as far as the carcass goes, Catron won't kill those L3s. Isopropyl alcohol would. It's a lot of isopropyl alcohol on a carcass. The mistake they made in Florida was leaving them in an open pit. And I think they ended up freezing them. They got some mobile reefer units and were freezing those carcasses at the end because it's Florida Keys. It's hard to set a fire.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on how infested your carcass is, right? I mean, what you would do. Yeah.
Well, you want to get rid of any of those larvae that could become pupa,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's where the burying or incineration comes in, because
Yeah.
you want to kill all those larvae so they don't become pupa, any of those L3s that didn't get killed. All right. Well, thank you all so much. Let's give our panelists a big round of hands. Oh, there's one last question in the audience. Sorry, where was it? Sorry.
Their job is movement control. People don't like that. But if everybody will play the game right, if we will control the movement, do you have a chance at preventing it from getting this far north? If we could keep it south of I-20, we are ringing a bell. Could that happen? If we have the adequate amount of cooperation, yes, I think that's possible. But you're right. It's across the border in Mexico, and we're going to be fighting incursions north for a while. We got enough sterile flies to control this. If we control movement, if we have good reporting, if we concentrate our efforts, but we don't have enough to re-eradicate it right now. We've got some on the horizon, and there's hope. And I have no doubt that we can get it, the numbers of sterile flies adequate for re-eradication, but it's going to take us a minute. So
Yeah, I
again,
mean, we're going
what-
to have to work together. We
Yeah.
just really want to maintain continuity of business, really. And not looking negatively on movement restrictions, but like movement control and just monitoring. And we just don't want the spread more.
All right, let's thank our panelists. All right, I know y'all are eager to hit the road and go home. Just a couple last minute things. We do have New World Screwworm informational cards out there. So take one if you didn't grab one when you check in. They're great for producers, veterinarians. If you want to take several because you know somebody needs one, please feel free to do so. Also for the veterinarians in the room, we do have a Raider Vet Summit series. The one in July in a couple weeks is going to be on neurology. We have a board certified neurologist coming to do an all day. It's going to be a small group session. So if you're interested in neurology or you are needing some CE hours, there's flyers. So please feel free to pick those up. There are tons of Elanco fly season pamphlets out there. So those are helpful resources if you didn't pick those up. And I think we can do, Elanco is going to do a drawing. Is that correct? Are y'all ready? And we have a winner. And the lucky winner is, I never get to read these, Ryan Cash. You are the lucky winner of an awesome cooler. And then our runner-up is going to be Brett Witten. You have a cat. And Whitney Button as well. All right. So let's thank Elanco, our sponsors. Thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much.